excited to have you. We're thrilled to have you. 21 years old. You're doing significant things down in the southeast portion of the country in the Florida market. And we're excited to have you on the show and learn a little bit of what you're actually doing to find so much success. But before we actually get into those details, if you could share just a little bit more about yourself and also how you got started in real estate, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So, like you said, I am, I guess, kind of on the younger side of some real estate investors. I am, 21. I'm flipping currently about 80 or so houses a year. I got an awesome team of, 10 people, and, that 10 people includes myself, so 9 others. And, we just kind of like to get things done down here. Like I said, like you said, I should say, I started getting into flipping right out of high school. I bought my first property that was a little condo by the beach. I bought it because everyone was like, go get some passive income, go get some rentals, and which is great if you already have money. But I was coming out of high school, I barely had enough money for a down payment on it. A couple $100 a month wasn't really going to change my life, so I decided to end up flipping that condo, made some money on it, bought another house and then another 2 houses, and then kind of just kept flipping from there.
If we could backtrack just briefly. And so 21 years old, you started right after high school getting into real estate, but you also had a few odds and end jobs between there. Just kind of explain to the audience exactly what did that lull or that period before you actually start getting some traction actually look like, as far as having a job and then beginning to dabble in real estate. How were you able to get it off the ground, and what did it look like achieving that with those odds and end jobs?
Yeah, so I guess I would say like my first and only real job was they call it a server at a little local resort, and it wasn't really a server; it was more like a busboy position, because it was like an all-you-can-eat buffet style, restaurant. So anyway, I did that. I did that for probably a couple months. In the meantime, I was getting started and using some of that money to purchase, some car detailing equipment, because I wanted to get into car detailing. I liked it. Barrier to entry was pretty low. Started doing that. That was my main source of income for a little while, while I was in high school, and then, just after. Then I got into real estate, and I slowly stopped doing the car detailing business as I was able to make some money from real estate. But, I still did it for a while until I was able to, supplement.
If we could bring things up to more current events, what exactly are you doing today? You mentioned that you are flipping somewhere close to about 80 homes per year. You've got a team of 10 people, including yourself. How are you going about funding these flips, and how are you keeping these projects on schedule?
Yeah, definitely. So as far as funding, I guess I could start with, how I started out versus how I'm doing it now. I started out just, going to hard money, paying the fees on the hard money costs. You got to put some of your own money into the down payment and everything like that. I did that for a while. That was fine. Then I got into learning how to raise private money for things. And, once I had a little bit of a track record, it wasn't like, my first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 deals. I was able to, build people's trust, so where they wanted to invest in, my deals, right? And once I figured out, private money investors normally like to fund 100% of deals, because they can make more interest on their money. That was like huge, because now instead of having to put my own money into a few different deals and only being able to do a few at once, I can get 100% or at least close to 100% financing on all my fix and flips. And now I can do it basically as many as I can find and as many as I can manage to do the renovations on.
How are you locating these opportunities, and what's the price points that you guys are going after? I know that Florida market is pretty steep prices there. What does that look like for you guys?
There are some, more expensive, areas. I would say, on the low end, I've bought stuff for, at or below $100,000, and not a whole lot. But, for the most part, we're buying stuff around 300,000 or so, and, selling retail around 500, more or less, some lower, some higher. Like I recently just bought a house for 1.3 million that's, needs about $230,000 worth of work that'll retail for about $2 million. But that's not something we do, every day per se.
If you could share with us a recent deal that you've completed, how you located it, how you funded the deal, some interesting details that accompanied the project, how you went about exiting.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you, there was this one of the most recent deals that I've done. It was, great win. I bought the house off the MLS. They were listed, I think, just over 700,000. I made an offer at 650. They came back and countered at 700, and we settled on 680. So we bought the house for $680,000, put about $95,000 into the renovation of it, and just sold it last Friday for $980,000. So that'll net north of six figures. And the way we were able to buy it so cheap was because it was a pretty weird layout. Had a really small master bathroom, really weird laundry room. We were able to kind of combine those spaces and make a much more functional master bathroom, big master bathroom, and thus we're able to get a much higher price for the house.
Yeah, that's really good. So did you guys purchase the property in full? So your investor, your private money person, did he buy the property in full? You guys held it, put some insurance in place for the period in which you guys held it, and then did the renovation on it? Or what does your strategy look like when you guys actually take a property down and begin the renovation process?
Yeah, so the way that we will do it a lot of times, and this depends on the price point. Like, this is a higher price point house, right? So didn't feel right tying up so much of one investor's capital in this deal in a first position mortgage, right? So like on the more inexpensive deals, I will have, the private investor, they'll come in, they'll mortgage, all the purchase price and all the renovation. Now they didn't do that in this case because it would have been, close to 800,000, right? Once it's all said and done. So what we did is we got a hard money loan for 90% of the purchase price and 100% of the renovation costs. And then I brought in a private investor to fund the remainder of the down payment and the closing costs. So we were into that deal with, basically no money out of pocket.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to move to the coaching portion of the show. We've got a portion of the show we like to call our Moonlight Coaching Round. And typically what we do is ask a few questions. If you could hold your response to between 1 to 2 minutes per question, that'd be great.
Okay.
The first question that I have for you is, what do you think every new real estate investor should know before investing in real estate?
I would say one thing that every new real estate investor should know before they jump into real estate is that things are just going to cost more than you expect. Your closing costs, probably the first few deals are going to be more than you expect. Your interest fees, all the expenses that go into buying a house, they add up a lot. So, a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to buy this house for $200,000. I'm going to put $50,000 into it and I'm going to sell it for $300,000. Well, and I'm going to make $50,000. Well, no, you're not, because you have to pay closing costs when you buy it, holding costs, loan costs, commissions when you sell it. That's actually probably like a break-even deal. Maybe you make like 10 grand. If everything goes according to plan. So you really need to be diligent in estimating all your costs and just overestimating, because there are just going to be more costs that you don't see. You're probably going to go over budget on your first few deals just until you understand estimating renovation costs. Even if you do estimate costs perfectly, there might still be something that comes up. So definitely plan for things to be more expensive than you thought.
The next question is, knowing what you know now, what kind of advice would you give a person attempting to get where you are within your real estate journey about balancing business and life?
I would say for people that are wanting to get where, let's say, I am right now, right? Everyone's situation is going to be different, because I'm a young guy. I don't have a wife and kids or anything like that I have to, go home to and take care of. That's going to take up a lot of my time right now. So I'm able to devote a lot of time to working right now. When I'm off and I'm spending time with, my parents or my friends or anything like that, then, I do try to be as present as possible. And I know I can work on that for sure. But as far as, if you have the opportunity to go and work, if you're young, you're single, work as much as you can, right? So then later on, you can spend time with your future family. This is the advice from my position. But if I was talking to someone that maybe does already have, an established career and a family and doesn't have as much time, find times where you can work. Is it, going in an extra 2 hours in the morning so you have an extra 2 hours in the evening to work on whatever you need to do for your side business, weekends. But, definitely still take some time, at least, half a day a week, 1 day a week, just to kind of rest and reset. And then you'll be much more efficient for the next week, and you'll just be relaxed and ready to go as hard as possible.
Next question. If a person had minimal amounts of time, no money or experience, but they wanted to start a business like yours, what steps would you recommend for them to take to start and scale a business like yours?
Well, I would say, go figure out a skill that you're really good at and that you can monetize well. So, for me, that was, I washed my car like every week, and I was very meticulous about it. So that was a skill that I had. Then I, got into it, with a friend, and we started doing that as a business to actually make money from it. Was able to save up some money and then, put that into, building a new skill for myself that would make even more money. So, I had time, but not money, when I started. And most people have one or the other. I would say too is, once you do some deals and you make some profit, don't just, take it all out, right? Like reinvest into coaching, reinvest into mentors, because I've put a lot of money over the last few years into mentorship and into just education, because I know that if my mentors have learned something in 20 years and they teach it to me, I can do what they did in 20 years, ideally in 4 to 5 years, because they are giving me all the blueprints essentially, right? So it's worth spending the money on that. That's some of the probably best advice I heard when I was starting.
The last question I have for you is, what is the greatest coaching advice you could give to a new person about knowing their numbers? So when I say knowing their numbers, I'm referring to KPIs, putting money to the side for taxes, how much income you have coming in, how much expenses you got going out. What kind of advice could you give a person about knowing their numbers?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as knowing your numbers, number one, I would talk to someone who is doing what you want to do and is successful at it, right? Because obviously if they're successful, they've known their numbers, right? So the first hire that I ever made was a bookkeeper. So I got a bookkeeper to keep track of my renovation budgets, track of our closing costs, and holding costs and everything, to give us a P&L on every single job, right? So once we get a P&L, we understand, hey, this is what we're actually making, this versus what we thought we were making. We thought we were making 40 grand, we're only making 25. Now, if we do that over 10 houses, that's $150,000 we just lost. So, track your numbers. Whether you do it yourself or you hire a bookkeeper, you can do either, but I would definitely recommend to hire a bookkeeper. You can, contract them out as a service. It doesn't cost very much to do that, maybe a few $100 a month maximum. And they will make and save you way more money than they will cost you.
We're going to start wrapping things up. But before we do, we always like to have our guests share a great personal development book or either a great business book.
Yeah, I think this is probably something a lot of people are going to say or have already said. But, the book Rich Dad Poor Dad was really kind of what sparked all the interest in this and listening, to Robert Kiyosaki talking about real estate and just, what his philosophy on it was, really got me thinking about it, really got me, excited about real estate. So I would say, if someone's looking to get started, that's a great book to read just to kind of train your mindset on real estate.